In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson. This week on the show, Kathryn Yu, executive editor of NoPro, is joined by Danny Cannizzaro and Samantha Gorman of Tender Claws to talk about Virtual Reality 2, the sequel to the studio's cult hit, Virtual Reality, which dropped on the Meta Quest and Rift this week and will be coming to Steam VR soon. And I'll have a chat with Robert Modem, the creator of the site-specific theater bot, which has been delighting us on Twitter. But first, a quick word of thanks. We have had an astounding 31 backers join our Patreon this month. We put out a call because February has become a make or break month for NoPro. And while we have a long way to go, I'm feeling some hope. Let's give some thanks to the folks who jumped in this week. They are Cynthia Von Bueller, Mark C. Marino, Lissa Soap, hi Lissa, Christy Casey, Ben Rosner, Chelsea Sutton, James Matthew Martin, Ty Wynn, and Katrina Koulouridis. Thank you all so much. The rally continues. As I mentioned, 31 backers so far this month, which is the most we've ever had in a single month. We now stand at 365 backers, one for every day of the year. And that's the most we've ever had. But we're still about halfway to where NoPro needs to be. And while I'm feeling hope for the first time in a long time that we're going to be able to get the long-term structural support to carry on and even expand the work, we still can't do it without you if you aren't a backer already. Patreon.com/NoProscenium is the fastest way to show your support. A $2 or $5 a month pledge makes all the difference in the world to us. And I know things are hard financially for everybody. I shop at the store. I've seen the prices. Things are not great. We're being crushed from above. And this here has always been kind of an insurgency, if you will, in the larger culture. Look, we're also open to sponsorship and underwriting of the podcast and site if you happen to be operating at that level of resources. If you're a company, if you're looking to make an impact that way, if that's something of interest to you, reach out to me, Noah at noproscenium.com, and we can talk about that. Would be very happy to have support that way as well. And now, back to the regular part of the show, and Kathryn Yu with this week's headlines.
Hello, it's Kathryn Yu, executive editor of No Proscenium. Here's what's in your immersive headlines for February 11. Musician David Byrne's immersive theater show, created in collaboration with neuroscientist Mala Gankar, is set to make its world premiere in Denver in late August. The production, titled Theater of the Mind, will take audience members through a journey of, quote, self-reflection, discovery, and imagination, end quote, all inspired by and grounded in real-life science. The show is meant to be an intimate one for groups of only 16 audience members at a time. Meanwhile, the McKittrick Hotel in NYC began welcoming audiences again earlier this month. That is right. Sleep No More, Punch Drunk's award-winning immersive retelling of Macbeth, is back, with some small design and health and safety modifications, of course. You can get a peek at the changes to the production in the recent New York Times article by Alexis Solowski. Sleep No More New York's grand reopening is set for February 14th. Additionally, the French company Culture Spaces has announced that it will be staging its first North American exhibit in Lower Manhattan. Culture Spaces is best known for the popular immersive Van Gogh experience, which was housed at Atelier des Lumières in Paris and featured on the TV show Emily in Paris. The company plans to mount new bespoke digital art experiences every 10 to 12 months in their new digs. Over on the other side of the Atlantic, London-based immersive theater company Parabolic Theater has announced their new permanent immersive venue named Crypt. This new venue is dedicated to immersive and interactive theater, and it will open in the heart of Bethnal Green in March. The company is also committed to rehoming shows, which were due to run at the Vault Festival, which was unfortunately canceled earlier this year. The first performances at Crypt are set to begin in April. Londoners will also have the chance to experience a David Attenborough-narrated augmented reality journey all about the planet Earth. Created by Factory 42, with BBC Studios and inspired by the Natural History Unit landmark series, the Green Planet AR experience will allow visitors to travel through 5 digitally enhanced worlds, including rainforest, freshwater, saltwater, desert, and the seasons. Tickets are free and the exhibition runs through March 9. These have been your immersive headlines.
Thanks, Kathryn. In a moment, we'll have her talk with Danny Cannizzaro and Samantha Gorman of Tender Claws. But first, a quick disclosure. Kathryn did her grad school internship at Tender Claws this past year, which included working on parts of the game. It was my call to have her do the interview, as I saw her familiarity with the studio as an asset in the discussion you're about to hear. Now, you can find my launch day impressions on the game on our website.
Hello, everyone. This is Kathryn Yu, Executive Editor of NoPro, and I am delighted to have the studio co-leads of Tender Claws here with us today. If you could introduce yourselves.
Sure. I am Danny Cannizzaro. I'm one of the co-leads of Tender Claws, here with Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha, the other co-lead of Tender Claws.
And y'all have a very special project that has just been announced by the time this drops. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is a project we actually started working on maybe 3 years ago and predates our most current project, The Under Presents. We're super excited to get to announce it and share it with the world. It is a spiritual sequel to one of our first works, Virtual Reality, and it's a long-form game, a narrative comedy action mech platformer adventure about the collapse in the metaverse.
Metaverse, what a hot topic. And yet, y'all seem to have been working on this for quite some time. So virtual reality 2, is this your commentary about the metaverse, VC funding, digital afterlives? Let's unpack that a little.
Yeah, I think virtual reality kind of was our game that was both a love letter to VR and a little bit about kind of the hype cycle and the newfound enthusiasm for VR. And VVR2 kind of continues that and is a little bit our look at some of the trends we see going on in the medium, as well as our imagining kind of like, what does it mean to try and create a utopia? And then what does it mean if that utopia is then owned by someone who can kind of turn off the power switch at any moment? And what happens to the avatars that are uploaded once that does happen?
So what made you want to return to the VVR universe in the first place?
I think it was more the fact that it started kind of, a lot of our projects start as sort of something that like amuses us or interests us. And I guess to back up a second, I had thought about this and I had for a while, but I hadn't articulated it until today, that I kind of see this project, VVR2 Scottsdale, as like a part of the trilogy with VVR, Tendar, and now VVR2, which are very much a similar type of tone, humor, kind of comedic love letter to the sort of the ups and downs of trends and culture and the industry. And I wanted to kind of finish off that story. Also, we were really amused by and interested in a few different kind of things that were going around the zeitgeist. And, one was looking at the real, true outpouring of entities like Club Penguin shutting down, Sims Online, and just thinking about the interesting like anthropology of like the experience of a multiplayer world. And then, this was also before and predating and during creating The Under. So it was, before we really had a lot of experience with our own sort of, multiplayer world too. But that concept definitely intrigued us, and also there's this sort of like interest in this idea of companies like Alcor Cryogenics, where in a far future, this is really a speculative design story of a speculative design future, where if you upload your mind, there's people who are cryogenically like freezing just their mind with the hopes that maybe hypothetically it'll be able to hold brain emulation and it'll be uploaded, kind of like similar to the end of VVR. So let's say that's possible, and you upload your mind into a platform or a virtual social world, and what happens if that world changes.
Fascinating. So, I guess from maybe more of a bird's eye view, what ideas were you exploring in the first virtual reality as well as Tendar, and how does creating VVR2 close that loop in this sort of trilogy you just described, Sam?
Yeah, so I think a lot of our interest, or at least a lot of my interest, is in creating an interweaving narrative with the mechanisms that tell that narrative, and kind of talking about some of these reflecting on society through the mechanisms of gameplay. So you have a lot of that in VVR, which there's sort of a meditation on the nature of VR, but there's a meditation on gig labor. There's a meditation on AI, and this like very loose concept of AI, but AI from different lenses kind of filters through all three projects. And I know Danny had talked about this and actually had said something really interesting, but it's the different ways that AI are kind of dealt with. And Danny, do you want to take it?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. In VVR, you are positioned as kind of like a human labor doing emotional labor for AI. It's a kind of time of like post scarcity where like humans are kind of the well kept pets of AIs. And so we were kind of exploring like what would that relationship be like in this hypothetical future. And then with Tendar, we were looking at a different type of relationship. Tendar was our AR game. And so with an AR game, it's really about bringing in the world around the player. And so what we did in Tendar is we really looked at like, what does it mean to try and like bin all of our emotions and all of the world around us into these very discrete kind of categories? And what would it be like to try and teach an AI what it means to be human or to feel emotions? And so that's kind of some of the themes that Tendar explored. And then in virtual reality 2, we started with the premise that, okay, we're going to like the world of Activitude in VVR1 has pivoted. And instead of humans working for AIs, we're going to create this utopia where humans and AIs can live together and can even merge consciousnesses and like be together in this metaverse space. And that is Scottsdale. And so VVR2 starts with you uploading to Scottsdale Online this supposed utopia of humans and AIs, which of course immediately runs out of funding, and you spend the rest of the game trying to escape it and like merging with different AIs and other consciousnesses along the way as you try and kind of like get off the servers before it all comes crashing down.
It's essentially a comedy narrative platformer about escaping from dying worlds.
Ah, I see. No particular parallels to real life or anything there. So, Danny, you mentioned some of the other consciousnesses around there. I'm sure there are some big fans of virtual reality 1 out there who are wondering, who is present in Scottsdale? Who are some of the non-player characters that you might run into?
So I think Samantha, but there's so many characters. First off, this is the biggest game we've ever made. I think the script came in at like 600 plus pages or something. So there's a lot of characters in there. But one of the core things that kind of tickled us when we made this project was, well, what if we take one of the main characters of the first game, Chaz, and instead of having Chaz just be a character in this game, what if we made Chaz into a giant like mech that you could pilot around and fly the headsets? Instead of putting on the headsets, you're flying them like little airships. And what if you could actually be part of the Chaz collective? So the game starts off and you meet new characters, but there's also Chaz there. There's a stowaway in the Chaz mech that we refer to as the Chaz Rat, who is actually a
well-known character.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
some familiar faces may show up if you're a fan of the first game, But if you haven't played VVR1, I imagine that there's, something for everyone here.
Yeah,
It's
So
Samantha,
also
you want to talk to that? Because I know you like really designed it or wrote it to be something that's standalone too.
yeah. So even though there's conceptual ties and fans of VVR can recognize that world here, it's also it stands alone and kind of starts from like that we're using that pivot, that this like kind of cycle of company pivots and different products to almost reset a little bit the rules of the universe. So it can be played standalone, and it's also we like to challenge ourselves and like go doing different approaches. And this is definitely like a very different gameplay style than the Under. There is some crossover, but we also wanted to really engage with this concept of what do what do enemies and combat look like in this space.
So, what do enemies and combat look like from the Tender Claws perspective, which I imagine is quite different than a lot of other games out there?
Well, it starts out unsurprisingly with a vacuum-like tool where you can vacuum up stuff all over the world and objects that you can either kind of grind down into CP goo, which is like a computing goo that powers the world, or you can like reverse the flow of your vacuum and use it to kind of like shoot out into the world. Uh, the more CP goo you collect, you get the ability to kind of slow down time, which is used in a fun way in VR. And then each roommate that you upload, as you're piloting this Chasmech through the dying world, every time you upload and merge minds with a new roommate, they add on a tool or an ability. So at some point, you end up getting some boxing gloves on springs. Another point, you end up with a dog puppet named Mr. Golden Frappen who like spits out goo that kind of controls these little deletion larvae you can kind of like tell to delete away parts of the world.
Another thing that I know is pretty important to other Tender Claws projects is the soundscape. And so, at least looking at the trailer, it seems like music is something that is really rich in Scottsdale, if you can talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah, Samantha, do you want to talk about some of the
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering what to give away. So there's elements of when we first were writing this and we were constructing it, and I think that's gonna more and more throughout the year will become apparent is that it's structured as a little bit like an opera. So the characters themselves, a lot of them have at least in our mind in development have theme songs, and we got some of the artists we had worked with before. Aaron Markey came back and did a special song for the game. The lead Gavin is um as Dakota, who's a musician who like had some just really brilliant funny like mind meld like lo-fi Casio songs about the characters. So there's a lot of I think musical humor involved too.
Yeah, I think that we cast Dakota specifically because he also had this musical practice, and so the character of Gavin, who's like one of the main characters you meet away in the story, like does this kind of like Casio keyboard electronic folk music and is constantly kind of like singing songs about other roommates or other things, and so there is a little bit of like a musical element that goes through that, and then there's an elaborate ASMR kind of like rhythm game parody section that involves some music in there. So it definitely has different styles and types of music throughout.
It seems like you probably went through a bunch of different types of combat mechanics, weapons. What's the like guiding principle that ties it all together?
Yeah, I think we started off interaction wise with the core idea that at any point in the experience you could kind of either be this mech, like you could hit a button and embody the mech, like your arms would be the giant robot arms, um, or you could press another button and kind of like go inside the mind of that mech, at which point you were in a situation with like all the other roommates and mind mates that were kind of like backseat drivers. And so that was where we started from that interaction thing, is what does that lead to in terms of like having to navigate an outside world which might have enemies, but also having to navigate interpersonal drama of like one roommate's not doing the dishes. And from there, we kind of just built out this world. And I think that led to stuff like, security systems and deletion happening in the outside, and things that resemble more traditional boss battles, and a whole kind of range of interactions.
It's a little bit like maybe like Inside meets the crumbling of worlds and like the death of worlds, like the end of Never-Ending Story.
Wow, what a host of inspirations. So what do you hope people take away from experiencing this project?
I hope that I think there's like hopes on various levels. Like one, side of hope's a writer, the other side is like what the experience will be. And there's a lot that I think there's a lot about the world that's kind of like surreal and heightened, and even parts that are funny. But I'm hoping that it will still feel like there's grounding in the characters, or motivations, or there's things you discover. The game kind of unfolds. When you think you get a hand of other on a mechanic, it introduces a new mechanic, and I'm hoping that it feels like a little bit from the narrative that you're unfolding, and you're going on this journey with these characters along the way.
Anything to add to that, Danny?
I mean, I feel like some of our creative process is very iterative too, where at least personally, I often don't have like a very explicit like end goal, but instead like to find interaction that feels very specific, or a story beat, or something that's interesting, and then just kind of like follow it and develop it and see where it leads. And I think this game has a lot of that too, where it kind of like Samantha said, it unfolds over time, and it takes you on just kind of this very crazy journey through a bunch of different spaces and a bunch of different ideas around VR and the metaverse and technology and utopias and failed utopias. And but yeah, I think a lot of our projects, and especially these that are a little bit reflective on the media, we'd like to try and just make people think about the mediums that they're using, and like some of the just examining them critically, and not just taking them for granted, but thinking about like what like implications they have, and what the ways in which they're used. Because I think that's I think it's fun to explore some of these new genres before the rules of what they are firmly set kind of in culture.
And
yeah,
I think oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
We were talking, and I think there's an interesting theme. We're really interested in a kind of like comedic and general kind of curious examination of what happens to what happens to the basic everyday, your existence in the social sphere, if like the public commons are owned, like if your existence is owned, what does that mean? Especially for, like as the avatars they're the only copy of their, and they're their, body basically uploaded as you're all digital. What does it mean to exist and live in the digital? What does death mean for the digital?
One of the first things the game asks you is, there's a little survey question as you're like being uploaded into Scottsdale Online, and there's a question of like, what do you want done with like your body? Do you want it turned into glitter or aquamation or cryopreservation? And the name Scottsdale actually comes from looking at Scottsdale, Arizona as like one of the places where real world cryogenics companies are headquartered, because it's very kind of like has a stable power grid and like good weather, and that was just fascinating to us. Both like Scottsdale is kind of like a retirement community, and the idea of like retirement communities and these kind of planned utopias, and looking at how those function and how those relate to the concept of the metaverse.
And I think the inspiration for the project came from the joke that Scottsdale's tagline, as the official slogan of the city, is the most livable city, in quotes. So that, amused us with the concept of like preservation and cryogenics, and like, what does that mean?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we're running out of time here. So I just have one more question. I don't know which one of you wants to answer it first. and I'm sure other people are going to start asking this too. What do you want done with your body when you die? Since you brought it up.
I have to call out Zelver Nelson, who is the originer of the glitter idea, and I think that's glitter's great. I'm gonna go with glitter.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought of that. Like Scottsdale doesn't make the best case for uploading and digitizing it, but it does seem amusing.
All right. Well, maybe let's take some time to figure that out. But again, thank you both so much. Virtual Reality 2 coming out soon to a headset near you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you're scrolling on Twitter, sometimes you find things that surprise and delight you. Those can be coming from people, or they can be coming from bots. One such bot is the site-specific theater bot, which has produced such gems as New Idea, a mime forced to scream staged at a gas station at night, and coming April 2025, an immersive relational site-based one-on-one performance staged in a reflecting pool. I'm pretty sure I've seen at least one of those shows in reality, or will be getting a press release for one of them soon, maybe even both. Today, we're talking with the creator of the site-specific theater bot. That is Robert Modem. He is a PhD candidate at the Center for Drama, Theater, and Performance Studies at the University of Toronto. Robert, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great.
Robert, this popped up on our radar some time ago, and I've been curious. One, I could never tell if this was a person writing all of these, or if it really was one of those kind of tweet bots that you have. So, which is it, for starters?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of both. So the bot, like a lot of the Twitter bots that you find online, is based on a very, very simple algorithm that just strings random sentence fragments together. So I create the sentence fragments. I think there are about 900 different fragments in it right now. And then it just randomizes it and sticks it together to hopefully create a sentence that sometimes makes sense.
What is do you have a favorite? I was about to get into like the details of it, but do you have a favorite thing the bot has come up with? You got one in particular, other than the pin tweet? Because the mime one was a pin tweet, and that one's a classic.
Yeah, one of the first ones that it did was an audio performance of a poem performed in the backseat of your car, and that just felt like something I'd been to before. It sort of resonated. Another great one is a rendition of your favorite aria staged as a game of telephone with 1,000 strangers, which I think is just like a hilarious image.
I think someone's written a grant for that at some point.
Yeah. Come to the net.
So what was the impetus here? You started this, if memory serves you, you started this last year, right? Or late 2020?
Yeah, last year. It's coming up on almost a year of this project being alive now. March 2021. I'm here in Ontario, at the University of Toronto. We were in the middle of a third wave lockdown, second wave lockdown, something like that. And I just wanted
even
to...
a wave at this point.
Yeah. I just wanted to create something creative and kind of fun and quirky that might brighten, I figured 2 people would follow it and might brighten someone's day. I think at the same time I was having, as a site-specific creator, all of these site-specific ideas and jotting them down in a notebook. And this seemed like a different interpretation of that.
There's definitely some that feel, and if you look at the whole of it, it pops one out about every 4 hours. But if you look at them in aggregate, you'll see there's certain themes. I notice around Christmas, there's a lot about Joseph and the Nativity. Was that something you waited, by the way? Like it was like, oh, put some of these in here right now. Do you have any control over what the bot does, or the bot just the bot just does what the bot does?
For the most part, the bot does what it does. But yeah, if there's something coming up that might be somewhat relevant to talk about, I go into the back end and do a little bit of editing and add a couple new sentence fragments to the tweet, or take out ones that might be getting repetitive. If somehow in the 900 different fragments, one comes up 3 times in a day or something, I'm always kind of like, why?
The algorithms get obsessed with things too. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's a pitch bot basically. So of course it's going to just like focus on, it's like throwing lots of spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks.
Okay.
Have you come across anything that you see? I mean, obviously you've written all the fragments, so some of this stuff is your subconscious being reorganized by a machine intelligence, for lack of a better term. Have you ever seen something that strikes you and you're just like, oh, I wish I had actually thought of that?
Yeah, for me, I always like the sentences that somehow fit together, because some of the first parts of a sentence might start with an audio play or a podcast or something. And so it's always nice when like the last sentence syncs up and it's like, listen to during another opera, or listen to during another performance, or listen to in the backseat of your car, as that one said. So it's fun when there's an actual logic to the sentence. But certainly all of them, I think, invite the reader to, even for 20 seconds, imagine what a game of telephone with 1,000 strangers would be like. And there's something fun about that.
What's your own relationship to immersive and site-specific theater? When did that begin?
Probably about a little over a decade ago, during my undergrad. I was introduced to site-specific work from a prof there. And I just find that the site-specific form, often with its grounding like in the local, it's sort of a community-based art form. I think it has the potential to be incredibly accessible in the way that it brings theater to new audiences. Just sort of grabbed onto that. I did a master's in site-specific theater, which exists if you travel to a tiny little town on the coast of Wales, Aberystwyth. Town of 9,000 people, but like 152 pubs. So tells you something about my year there. And then now I'm a site-specific practitioner in Toronto, and doing my PhD on the topic on the forum. So big part of my life.
Is there a particular type of production that you hope to kind of get up on its feet as the world attempts to spin back to something like what we had before?
Yeah, there are. I also think that there have been a number of wonderful discoveries during this time that I just want to keep exploring and playing with.
Like what?
In addition to this silly bot, I've been working with a company creating a series of site-based audio plays, really, but we're designing a platform that incorporates some augmented reality into them as well. And we're just releasing these to the public for free. And the ones that are out there so far, I get a notification to my phone anytime anybody does one. And it's just so wonderful to know that, on a random Tuesday afternoon, there's somebody in this location out in my city listening to this story that either I wrote or another local playwright wrote. And so I think there's, obviously that's a COVID-safe activity. It's outdoors. It gets people to experience their city in hopefully a slightly new creative way, which I all find really interesting. But there's also just something in that accessibility and the installation nature of it just being available at any time of day.
Yeah, installation work is often, to this day, one of my favorite things is Her Long Black Hair in New York City, which is, it is even like geolocated. You need to be in the location to do it, but you download all of the files ahead of time, or you access them if you've got a good enough connection in Central Park. And it was created oh gosh, I want to say like in the mid late aughts. It's just been there for almost ever. It'll probably be like going on 20 years in a couple of years.
Amazing.
And it's still just absolutely stunning and absolutely creative. And I often don't know why this sort of stuff isn't just everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Robert, what's been some of the, has this managed to open any doors for you, the theater bot, or connect you with like interesting characters around the planet? Cause it's just such a fun thing.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I started it thinking that, maybe 5 of my friends would follow it, or some local, companies in Toronto that do some immersive work. But I found this incredibly rich community of site-specific and immersive practitioners who, really grab onto some of these, and from all over the world. Lots in South America. But this one person in New York, Stephen Verdile, I think is his name, created a series. He's a graphic designer. He created a series of playbill program covers for versions of these tweets, for tweets that the bot tweeted out.
My goodness.
And so there's one where the bot says that this play by George Bernard Shaw takes place in an Arby's. And so he has an Arby's on the cover, and different characters from Shaw plays, and it's just kind of perfect.
Robert, how long will the site-specific theater bot be running for? Is this in perpetuity here?
That's kind of the neat thing about it too, is that it just in theory will continue to tweet a new immersive or site-specific performance idea every 4 hours, in theory for forever. Of course, Twitter won't last forever, and the site that's hosting it won't last forever. It's,
Twitter is eternal. It is hell. We cannot escape it.
It'll keep going.
All right. And for those who want to follow along, what is the handle for the bot?
Yeah, it's at Theater Site. Theater spelled RETHEATRE, at Theater Site, the site-specific theater bot.
Robert Modem, thank you so much for being on the show this week.
Thanks so much.
And that's it for this week's show. I know it was a short one. Don't worry, I'm not going to go on a 15-minute rant because there's extra time. What I am going to do is thank Danny and Samantha and Robert for being our guests. I'm going to thank Kathryn for jumping into the interviewer seat for the virtual reality 2 segment. And yeah, I just going to circle back real quick to the Patreon. I know, just overwhelmed with the level of support mentally at the least. It's so weird because financially still in the hole, but to watch like more than a score of people, to see our biggest one-day numbers, to see this outpouring of support, of belief, of faith, a lot of people who are putting in annual pledges, to see all of that happening and to know that we have, we live to fight another day. The runway gets a little extended. And to know and to kind of think about like, oh, how transparent should I be, et cetera, et cetera. The runway is to about May right now. That's my runway before like I'm in serious trouble. But every time we get a surge, we buy another week, we buy another month. We keep things extending, and it's definitely this weird kind of cycle, because I know that if we don't manage to get the numbers up, that like I have to take on a bunch of freelancing or I have to go in-house somewhere. That means I have to like, the question becomes like, well, how much can I still do the work. Because, I also have a senior citizen that in the form of my mom, who's got health issues, who I have to be able to be present to go take her to appointments. We have some help with that. Of course, that help costs money. And what I'm trying to say is I'm an American, like so many of you, trapped in a system we did not design and that doesn't really work for anybody. And I've dedicated a large chunk of my life to the idea that this art form is good in and of itself and can make everyone's lives better at a qualitative level. And doing that in a time that is, not the best time, not the best point in history for, and definitely not the best time in my lifetime. So it's weird, but what's been great these past couple of weeks is just everyone jumping in is really saying, don't cut and run, keep in the fight. We want to see this. We want to see this happen. We believe in immersive work. We believe that better days are ahead. We're going to take this moment where everything is so tough and we are going to double down on our belief that the work that's been done here already needs to keep carrying on. And that's what gives me the resolve to figure my way out of this, because a couple of weeks ago at the end of January, I was in a really dark place. But turning to all of you and seeing the reach back, I got choked up on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. All right, I promised you I wouldn't go on a long rant, so I'm going to cut it short there. We've got the Emmys coming up next week. That is the Audience Choice Awards for NoPro. This is the last day to vote. So if you hadn't heard the past couple of weeks, go over to the website right now, check it out. You do need to vote in 3 categories for your vote to count. We hope that you have seen enough, or at least heard enough about things that you can choose. Don't just choose randomly. Like, do a little research if nothing else. It's a great group. I think over 50 unique nominees across 14 categories. And we're going to be doing that as a live show next week. We're going to record that as well. And I do believe the plan is that is what the podcast is going to be next week. We'll have that and a discussion. Also, speaking of podcasts, you'll also find in the feed here, the review crew is back. They are recording on the regular, not as many live shows, but because they're changing up, we're getting more people in from the East Coast, swapping seats around. There were 2 segments on the review crew show this week. You can find it one stop back in the podcast feed. That also means coming up pretty soon, we'll get back to having the pick of the week. We'll have the pick of the week segment here as well. That's my goal. And yeah, I better get going because apparently the gardening happy neighbors are up to chaos somewhere around the building. I can hear the water pressure, or is that a grinder happening? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of noise soon. So I better go. Making podcasts in an apartment. Oh yeah. Let's give one more final thank you to both everyone who's joined in on the Patreon this month at patreon.com/NoProscenium, but also to our sustaining backers who keep us, who are the backbone of what we do. Ari Herstand, Brittany, Deborah Robinson, Elaine, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, David Bassick, Lonnie Hands-On, Mark Baltazar, Samuel Mustry, Sydney Guillory, and Jan Budman. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin. Siobhan, hi. For voicing our intro. Kathryn Yu is executive editor at NoPro and does our headlines. And this podcast is edited, et cetera, and scripted by, very roughly, yours truly. And until next time, thank you for wearing the mask.